Fine.
I will open up the August 4th, 2020 meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's a few minutes after 7 o'clock. I am Brian Stein, the chair. And with us tonight, we'll do a quick roll call of who is here on the planning board. So when I say your name, just say aye if you're here. Rick Mitchell.
Hi, Rick Mitchell here.
Richard Boroff.
Hi, Richard Boroff here.
Marnie Crouch.
Hi, Marnie Crouch here.
Bill Wheaton.
Here.
And Corey.
Hi, here.
Great. I think that's everybody on the board. So real quick on our agenda tonight, we have a few things. 354 Highland Street, Canterbrook Senior Housing is here to request to substitute a surety for one of the units, Unit 1. And we'll have Jill explain that in a few minutes to us. We'll also be discussing a potential bylaw change or addition, actually, of a flexible residential zoning bylaw. And we'll be talking about minutes and other staff reports, liaison reports, and so forth. So, Jill, if you could lead us off and explain what you are looking to do, that would be great.
Well, certainly. Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Canterbrook Capital. We're here this evening to speak to substitute security. Basically, what we had done at a few meetings ago is we had posted security in the form of a performance bond secured by Unit 1. We have actually sold Unit 1, and over time, we have done a lot more improvements, so we had our bond reduced dramatically. The performance bond was for about $142,000. Presently, we've actually reduced our surety to $63,020. So we are doing two things, seeking to substitute that performance bond, a cash bond. So basically what would happen would be Canterbrook would issue a check in the amount of $63,020. I would then deposit into an escrow account that I am the only signer for, and that money would be held pending an as-built plan that the subdivision has been completed in accordance with the approved plans and all conditions have been satisfied. If that were to happen, then the bond would get released, same as it would have happened with the performance bond. A surety bond is obviously even better than a performance bond because it's cash, it's available immediately. So we would say that that was actually almost a better form of security, although the other performance bond was only for $141,000 and the value of that unit was far greater than what the surety was. So we're seeking that. We're seeking to allow that substitution, and then we are seeking to reduce. And in support of that reduction, I give you an outline of basically.
Sorry, Jill. Patrick, can you just mute everybody but Jill, please?
Okay, you can hear me? Okay, so basically we had prepared and presented to the board a table outlining all of the items that continue to be incomplete and then the value of those incomplete items, and that totaled $63,020. It was for the final coat of pavement, for completing 15 trees, just completing the sidewalk. It was minor things in terms of, the entire infrastructure. And as I said, they amounted to $63,000. So what we would like this board to do this evening is a couple of things. One, vote to approve the substitute of security. And then as part of that, vote to approve and sign the discharge of mortgage, because your mortgage is on the property. And this particular sale is set to happen, hopefully, if the board approves the substitution at the end of August. And then you would simply also vote to accept that tripartite agreement. in order for you to accept a cash bond, there has to be some agreement between us, among us actually, because it's among Canterbrook, Man and Man, and the town. And that's what that tripartite says. And it basically says, look, I'm holding that money for the sole purpose of the town being able to confirm that all improvements have been made. To the extent the town says they haven't, you have the right to draw against the account at any time. And that's what the tripartite would be. So you would basically direct the execution of that as well. And then you would vote to reduce the surety to the amount of $63,020. Thank you.
I so move. I'm going to have to actually say this, right?
Yeah, do we have something that we can read from, or to make these motions is just be a little bit easier?
Yeah, I've got the 3 points, but I'll probably express them poorly.
I did not provide you with a motion, but I can, if you'd like, I can make one and then you can just ratify it. Is that better, or how would you like to do it, Mr. Stein?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just having the right language, as you know.
Fine.
I don't know if she's allowed to read it off or not, Patrick, do you know?
No.
And then somebody can say so moved, or I guess.
I'll be happy to read it, or Patrick can read it. I mean, and then we vote on it. But that way, what we will have in the audio is exactly the same as
Right.
what the motion
Right.
is. When
Right.
we do that.
Legally required.
What's that, Richard?
What is legally required? We'll have what is legally required, so yeah.
Right, we'll have the wording. Okay, Jill, yeah, if you could do that. that'd be
Absolutely. So basically, the first motion would be that the board makes a motion to accept substitute security in the form of a cash bond. The second motion
good.
would
Let's
be,
just do one at a time.
okay,
Okay.
So,
I move that the Hamilton Planning Board accept security in, say it again, please, Jill?
You
just say so moved, I think
So
is all.
moved.
We'll have the language.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
aye.
Marnie Crouch. I think, hold on, you're muted. Can you unmute Marnie?
I think she can unmute herself.
Yeah, she can. You there, Marnie?
Maybe she stepped away.
Okay, so Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
Corey,
Corey W. I.
right, and Brian Stein, aye. Unanimous.
then the second motion would be a motion to approve.
Excuse me. It's not unanimous. I just unmuted myself.
Well, we were trying to get you to unmute yourself.
Right, I know, but I just, I
Sorry.
had to figure out where it was. So when you said it was unanimous, it
Well-
wasn't. So I don't mean to be argumentative, but that was putting words in my mouth. I
Well,
did,
hey, unmute yourself next time, please.
Make it unanimous.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marnie.
well, I just had a point that we're substituting a mortgage for an escrow, and a mortgage is more secure than an escrow, just so everyone is advised. So in any kind of financial trouble, if you have a mortgage, you're better off than if you have a cash bond. But I am going to assume that Patrick has ascertained the bona fides of everything in this tripartite agreement. And being new to the board, I'm familiar with all the background with respect to Canterbrook. So it isn't that I'm calling anyone unreliable or anything like that, but I just wanted to make that point. But given the assurances and the comfort level of the other members of the planning board, I would vote to approve the substitution of the security.
Okay, Marnie, so
It's
you
an
know,
aye.
Bill Mann has been around for years.
So hold on. We don't need any more discussion. I think
Okay.
all we needed was the vote. So I think we're there.
That's the vote.
So we have 3 more motions, I think, to make. So let's go through those. And if there's any discussion, we can hear those. So Jill, please.
So the next motion would be to approve the reduction in the amount of security from $360,000 to $63,000, $63,020.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now, any discussion?
I just want to ask a point of clarification. That is strictly because you've approved or you've completed tasks that created that value in the first place?
Yes,
correct?
100% correct. We have
Okay.
completed over half of what was remaining to be done.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that on my list. So I just wanted to make sure I know what I'm talking about.
I appreciate that, yes.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Again, roll call vote. Bill Wheaton,
Yes.
Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, I.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
Cory Bellew,
Aye.
Marnie Crouch,
I,
and Brian Stein, aye. That one's-
Thank you. So now the next one is an approval of the tripartite agreement. And so the motion would be to approve the tripartite agreement in the form submitted. And that's it, because everybody signed, so you're not directing anyone to sign, so all parties would.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Again, I'll do a roll call vote. Bill Wheaton,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Sorry. Rick Mitchell, I.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
Cory,
Aye.
Marnie Crouch,
I,
and Brian Stein, aye. Okay, one more.
The fourth and final is a motion to approve the execution of the discharge of mortgage, which would release the performance mortgage because we have already accepted the cash bond.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
Bill, second. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, Rick Mitchell,
I.
Bill Wheaton,
Aye.
Marnie Crouch,
I,
Cory Bellew,
Aye.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
and Brian Stein, aye. Great.
And at this point, then, there are documents that need to be signed by the board. They're in Patrick's, Patrick, you have the full copies of everything.
I do.
They're in Patrick's office, so when the board has the opportunity to go by to sign, that would be fantastic.
Great.
Just a quick question, update on the project progress. How many units are left to be built?
Hi, Rick, this is Larry Smith. I finally got on.
Yes,
Sorry.
you did.
Yes, on Mary's computer. So sorry about that. To answer your question, there are 11 units sold and 12 left to sell. We've been pretty slow the last 4 months.
So how many units are left to be built, I guess would be my question.
Oh, left to be built. So there are 7 single-family homes that are left to be built. No, there are 6 single-family homes left to be built, one triplex, and then there's a number of units within. One duplex left to be, one full duplex left to be built, and 6 single-family homes, and then there are a number of partially finished units or weather-tight units that are complete, 2 weather-tight, and that would be 3.
but 11 have been sold.
Correct.
And there are currently, let me make sure I get this right. 1, 5. There are currently 7 people living on the premises today that have closed their homes with us. So 7 of those 11 that are sold are living there today.
So it's not 7 people, it's 7 residences are occupied.
That is correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And except for one single woman, they're all couples.
Right, okay.
I've noticed a lot of the landscaping is already finished, right, Larry?
That's correct. I think, and again, I didn't hear Jill's presentation, but I'm just assuming, Jill, you read from our spreadsheet. I'm going to guess 90% of the common area landscaping is finished. And then as we finish units or we finish buildings, we complete the landscaping on the building.
Great. Anything else? No? Great.
Perfect. I appreciate everybody's time this evening.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much.
And thank you. And again, I apologize for my technical issues tonight. So you should
No
all-
worries. No worries.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening. I appreciate your time.
Great. You too, Jill.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good night. Okay, moving on to potential bylaw. We've been, over our last few meetings, discussing a potential new bylaw, flexible zoning bylaw that was, it's initially based on Wenham's flexible zoning bylaw that allowed the old golf course to be built upon with various types of units. We're considering implementing something similar in our bylaws to, essentially allow for different types of housing units to be built, to ensure some open space on various pieces of land, and then, which that bylaw did initially as well. But, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but one of the main reasons we started this was to figure out a way to protect, the parcels in the open space that the town really wants to protect, not just open space on some vacant piece, or ensure open space on some piece of land that might get developed. That's part of it, but the real impetus for this was to allow for some maybe slightly denser development, but also protect key parcels in town, and how to best do that. So for those of you that are on the call that aren't familiar with this, that's kind of in a nutshell what we're looking to do, and we're in the very infancy of trying to do that and figure out ways to do that. So we'll be talking about some of those specifics tonight. And again, this is, I don't know what the second or third draft of this, I think, that Marnie has spent a lot of time on, Patrick spent a lot of time on, Rick, to try to work out some language that isn't, I wouldn't say out of the ordinary, but it's not, it's just interesting and complicated how this could work in terms of potentially setting a fund up to potentially buy open space on other parcels. There's just numerous ways to preserve open space with this bylaw, which is one of the main factors and main focuses. So, Patrick, if I missed anything, let me know or bring everyone else up to date. But that's kind of where we are at this point. And we haven't talked much about the specifics yet, which we'll get into tonight, percentages and units per acre and so forth. So that's where we kind of are, I think, at this time.
Yeah, I agree. We've spoken a lot in generalities. We've talked a lot about the goals and more particularly the purpose kinds of statements and focus that we'd really like to pursue, and why we think those elements are important in terms of creating a new bylaw that allows us some flexibility, allows us the ability to really respect open space, potentially even create some in a meaningful way, especially on properties that have significance, connectivity, are contiguous, those kinds of things that have some real public value to it. So you were right on target, Brian.
Great. So where should we start tonight? Last time we spent a bunch of time talking about the purposes of the bylaw and getting those defined, and kind of shortened up from, I think, 11 down to 5 or 6. Now, Rick, you've put together kind of a matrix of density percentages, bonuses, and so forth that you kind of extrapolated from the senior housing bylaw a little bit and modified from there. I have a few comments, but I think, Rick, if you could maybe, or Marnie, even if you want to kind of explain what we've done over the past couple of weeks, so that those on the call other than us can hear that.
Well, could I just ask Rick a question? I just printed out a matrix that Patrick sent this morning. Is that the same one that you had sent me? I don't believe it is.
No, it's a updated version. That's why it says 8/4/20 on it.
Oh, yes. Huh. It helps to notice these things. I unfortunately didn't notice this until right before the meeting because it showed up in my inbox in a conversation, and I didn't actually realize that I had to that I had to click that. So it wasn't in my normal inbox, so I missed it.
That's the problem with these. When you do these continuous conversations, the documents get embedded in there and you don't necessarily see them.
Yeah, and so when I opened my email, I saw conversation and somehow I found it. But if the board members have the draft, and when I say draft, I truly mean draft. It was just something I put together more for my own edification and try to assist anybody else who was interested, and maybe you, Corey, because you're new to the planning board as well. But on page 5 of the draft, I tried to compare the senior housing bylaw, Wenham's bylaw, and an earlier version of what Rick had sent me. And then in the memo that I had, or an email I had sent, I tried to outline different issues as we move forward in trying to put a matrix together. And so I don't know who wants to frame the discussion, but I think that the matrix is a really helpful tool, but there are all sorts of questions embedded in putting it together.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful, Marnie, just to start with going through your, because you did a nice summary of that email of about 7 or 8 points, of issues that we need to discuss. Density was one of them, and I forget, I don't have that email in front of me, but it might be worthwhile going through your edits to the bylaw, because I think it'll help focus the discussion. And then, because I think the matrix is going to be a byproduct of the language, and the matrix is going to be one that we probably wrestle with the most. But I think it would be good to put it in context of the language that you've been working on.
Right.
Can I interject here for 1 second? As I read both matrices, I had some questions about how they actually work. So my first question was, there's a base density column that's very different from the existing zoning district. So it looks like you're saying here that, for example, in Rick's version, that you can put 4 units per acre, I don't know, on an R1 and an R1B or an RA, even though those are very different current densities. And I had thought, and Marnie's has somewhat the same issue. I had thought what we were doing is we were going to take the underlying density and apply a factor to that. So you get a proportional bonus of some kind in an R1 that's very different than you would in an RA because the starting point is different. But if you're going to have a universal starting point, that's almost equivalent to changing the zoning bylaw. And I think there would be a lot of public resistance to that.
But
I think,
that's-
I think people would say, fine, in an area that's really low density, we give you a 50% or 100% increase, but it's on that density. And that density is different than it would be downtown or some area in between. And to start off, say, well,
As I said, I'll just make one point, and then I do want to move back to the text, because that matrix is the one where we'll have the most debate, I'm sure.
right.
The base density format was actually taken from the senior housing bylaw that raised the base density that exists in those zoning districts. So I used that as a template and inserted that base density. So that's up for
so
debate.
I would say right up to begin with, I think that would be problematic for the success of this ordinance.
Right.
Well,
Did you see?
You're effectively
Bill,
saying,
Bill, I get that. I
Okay.
get that. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, it's going to be the one we have the biggest debate about. But I like to save this and focus on what Marnie's done with the language, so we get a sense of what she's telling us and the edits she's made, because I think it will then flow into that matrix rather than debating the matrix without knowing where it fits into the language.
Right, and I think the other point to remember is that, as of right now, this requires, 40% open space. So whereas, our base zoning bylaw doesn't for, single family home.
No, I understand that, and I also had a question with as you read across in the columns, you have bonuses 50, 25, 25, and they add up to 200%.
Yeah.
And then how do you use the 200% to get from 4 to 6?
Well, it's the formula that was used in the senior housing bylaw. So Bill, I want to focus on.
I'm just saying it doesn't add up.
Right. Let's move on. Let's move on to the text first, and then if we get to this later, we will talk about it tonight or at another time. But Marnie, if you could kind of lead us through the text, that would be great.
The text. Well, everyone was talking about purposes, and so I reduced the number of purposes, but to be candid, I think I kept all the purposes. I just condensed them into 5. So if anybody has any problem with the purposes, speak up. But, the purposes, are a framework that would guide any review of development under this bylaw. But when you go and look at the overall purpose of the bylaw, it says many of the same things that were in this specific section 8.1. So these were all reconfigured from the Wenham bylaw and reduced. And I don't know if anyone has any comments with respect to that.
I thought they were terrific.
Thank you.
I think they're really good the way you condensed them, edited them. I thought they were very good.
Thank you.
Marnie, I agree. I think it's good. I have a problem with some generalities, and this is just me, but I have a problem when it says things like perpetuate the appearance of the town's traditional New England landscape. There's no way to quantify that, and somebody can say, "Hey, I got a brown house and it looks like New England to me," and everybody else will say, "Well, it's got to be a white house."
Well, I'll just step back a little bit, because when I first came up to the North Shore and drove through Hamilton and the surrounding areas, it screamed New England to me. I mean, I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and if you drive around Western Pennsylvania, it doesn't look a bit like New England. And Hamilton does have a character to it that I think is not just important for the town, it's important for the region. And just like every community has its own uniqueness to it, like Salem and the seaport and the China trade, that's a treasure not just for Salem, it's a treasure for all of New England. And our landscape and our farmland and our equestrian heritage, I think provide meaning, not just for the people in town, but also for people who live in more dense communities like Beverly and Salem, who can travel here. And when they see the Congregational Church in Wenham and they drive and see our town hall and the churches and the open space, it has a definite character. It may be hard to quantify.
Stop for a second. I understand what you're saying. And
The
I
purpose
also,
doesn't have to be quantified. It's not mathematical. It's more aspirational.
Right, and I don't want to get hung up on sort of these very broad, encompassing purposes when there's a lot of detail that we could be focusing on.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think we're going to get a Frank Lloyd Wright development in Hamilton and it.
So keep going, Marnie.
Yeah, let's move on from that. I think in general, I think they're fine and well written, and if we want to come back to a couple points, we can, but let's move on.
Okay, so I deleted the definitions with respect to affordable. And actually, it might be that we could include them in section 8.3 just as a suggestion, but I don't think they need to be in this bylaw. But I did think the definition of contiguous open space and the off-site open space acquisition fund and then off-site off-site open space. They are from the Wenham bylaw, but I added developable acres, and that is from the senior housing bylaw, which I think that's probably important to have in here because it does actually flow into the matrix at some point.
Yep.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think it makes sense. I'm trying to remember. I don't have it in front of me. The our definitions section from, that's in the rest of the bylaw.
I think I pulled that from the senior housing bylaw. I didn't make it up.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
No, I mean, I didn't like formulate it in my own mind. I think I pulled it from.
No. I get that. I'm just wondering if we need it, if it's here and if it's already in the definitions section of the rest of the bylaw. There's a whole.
I think it might just be in the senior bylaw.
That's my question. So
I can.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up.
Oh, here.
looking it up, Rick?
I'm looking it up.
Okay.
It's 8.2.8 of the senior bylaw.
Yeah, it's not in the definitions.
Okay.
So that's why I pulled it in here. And then again, I just pulled, administration, planning board rules and regulations right from the senior housing bylaw.
Hey, Marnie,
Yeah.
hey, Marnie, can we back up to you have the off-site open space and the off-site open space acquisition fund, which is fine. I have no qualm with that. I'm just, and this is a question to Patrick or anybody else, is how do we create those? And really, I'm thinking of the acquisition fund. Is that something that takes an act of the town to vote a creation of that, or is that a state statute, or not? Does anybody know?
What? Once we get this sort of congealed, I definitely need to have town council weigh in on that sort of thing, so we're doing it correctly. I don't think it takes a home rule petition or something that elevated, but I would expect that we probably need to do this within the context of a bylaw, so the money's protected and used for the specific purposes. That being the case, that would definitely need to have town meeting vote it. But like I say, I think it's, once we get something on these two fronts, meaning this flex bylaw as well as the open space acquisition fund, Yeah, I want to have town council evaluate, review, and legalize both of them.
Got it.
And they're willing to do that for us, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
I know on Nantucket they have these types of funds, and I looked at it, and it's much more complicated on Nantucket than it might need to be here in Hamilton.
I
But
bet it
that's
is.
one community. Well, their houses are a lot more expensive than the ones here in Hamilton, and we have some
Oh, yeah.
expensive houses.
On a thought on the offsite open space versus offsite open space acquisition fund, do we want to maybe just omit the possibility of a developer buying free land within the town limits and more guide them towards the acquisition fund so that it is a focus on contiguous land? Whereas, last week we had a couple of weeks ago, we had discussed using smaller parcels of land, say a 2-acre parcel versus something that's part of a contiguous 18 or 20. Maybe we drive density towards these smaller parcels that aren't necessarily able to be protected in a large contiguous space. That open space purchased by a developer doesn't really omit a smaller parcel that could be preserved for a higher density project, whereas the fund, it's more under our control and is almost always assured to be the contiguous land. And then we can additionally, because of that, save the smaller parcels for more density.
Corey, I would agree with that. I think procedurally, it kind of opens up a can of worms if the developer says, well, I'm not going to, put money into the kitty. What I'm going to do is, turn over a piece of land I have over here, which is 8 acres or 10 acres, and give that to the town instead. And then the town's everybody's going to chime in. Well, we really want this piece of land. It wasn't on our, and then it's just, I agree. I'd rather the town have the control over what it will accept rather than let the developer try and create a gift to the town in lieu of making a payment. Let's put it that way. Because you just don't know whether the gift is going to be right or not.
I think the question is if a developer proposes to give the town land, under the bylaw, the planning board should have discretion to say, no, we don't want it, sorry. I mean, so if we could say, yes, we'll take it because it's worth having versus no, we don't want it, then I would disagree with you. So
the other part of it would be that the piece of land should have value equal to or about the same as the assessed, whatever the donation should be if it were cash.
Right,
So
but I mean, as long as
dollar amount equivalency.
Yeah, as long as we would retain the discretion to say, no, we don't want your land.
Yeah,
then I
agree with
think we
that,
should
Marnie.
leave it in there. But if we, were compelled to take their land, then we're not getting any benefits. So Bill would be right. But a developer may not have cash, but they may have land. If their land's worth taking, then we could take it. But if it's not, we can say, no, sorry, we don't want it. Come up with the cash, or you're not going to do the development.
I think the real problem is that what developer would actually have land of any consequence in the town of Hamilton and bought it without wanting to build on it.
I think that's a good point. I think that, and I think this is Corey's point, is that it probably makes sense just to make it simple and clean, is that if the developer wants to do additional development and get density, that he pay into a fund that the town decides where it wants to spend that money. Because otherwise, if we're letting the planning, even if we let the planning board say yes or no, we're kind of like picking winners and losers. And I don't want the planning board to have that responsibility. That should be a town by a town vote as to what's acceptable and not acceptable.
Or
Yeah, I
at
agree
least
with
some body of the town that's in charge of making these decisions. It gives the board a lot of discretion
Yeah, that I
Yeah.
don't think we want.
Yeah, okay, I agree.
Well, I think and I really appreciate that point, but part of the problem is open space purchased as opposed to open space owned. So if
David?
it's something that was owned for 20 years, it might be more valuable than if the developer goes out and buys it for the specific purpose. But I very much get the point, and I'm not going to fight to the death over a land swap.
Yeah, I just think the land swap gets complicated in ways that makes this hard.
Yeah, and I agree, Rick. It puts the onus on us to, say yes or no on a parcel, and that could get hairy at times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It works.
Hairy is the right word.
This kind of
that's
thing
a technical term.
This kind of thing works when a developer wants to buy an off-site house or parcel to do affordable housing. That's a little bit different. This is, that is what it is. This is open space. It's public.
And then the other part of the problem is getting agreement on the value. The developer might come in and say, well, this is worth $1 million. And we look at it and say, it's only worth 500,000. We don't want to get into that kind of discussion either. If you keep it to cash, cash is cash. $100 is $100.
Right.
I think we've got that one worked over. So Marnie, are you okay with leaving that piece out?
I am. I just, you hate to reduce our options, but I understand fully the problems associated with trying to value that type of land. I mean, and ascribing a value to it would be difficult, and it would afford the planning board so much discretion that it would probably be open to criticism. So even though I like options, I can be convinced to remove that.
Oh, we're still open to criticism. Don't worry.
We can, like tentatively take it out, but if you can, think of a scenario where it might work, I don't know. But again, there are problems associated with that valuing these pieces of land. And if it really was so valuable, why wouldn't the developer build on it?
Yeah,
Let me throw an idea out. About 5 years ago, the Board of Selectmen created a land acquisition committee. That committee also created several pages worth of criteria that are supposed to be used in the event that the town wants to buy land for whatever purpose. It may be an instrument and a body that we could use for this purpose. I'm not exactly sure how to put tab A into slot B, but as we talk about this process and acquiring land for town purposes, that might have some applicability. So I just throw that out there for that potential.
Well,
I think
you could conceive of a piece of property that may abut a property that's used for recreation, for fields or whatnot. It's not an ideal parcel, but it may add to an existing parcel so that it would, in and of itself have no value, but it might have value to the town. So,
the problem is I don't think there are that many properties around that would do what you want it to do and be available to do what you want to do with it.
Right.
I think the big thing is we can use the cash. We know what it is. We know its value, and we can spend it easily.
That's assuming we have enough of it.
Well, the point is, we'd be getting.
There's never enough.
Never enough. If we were going to
There's never enough.
I'd rather get cash than land. Land you got to think about. Cash you don't have to think
Well,
about.
you're gonna have to use the money in the fund for land, so you got to think about it at some point. It's just not us doing that.
Exactly. But you can pick and choose. Where if the developer comes in and says, "I want to give you land," and then you say, "Well, we don't really want this piece of land." Well, he says, either I give you the piece of land or I don't do the project I want to do. So,
Can I make a suggestion? Marnie, can you keep going? And because I have on the same page too, I have a question.
Okay, well, we'll say remove subject to someone having a really bright idea of why it should stay. How's that?
Well, and I remember that matrix you talked about, Patrick, or list of criteria. I'll have to look at that again just to see if it's, very specific, and if it's something that we could, as a board or transfer to another land acquisition board, whatever it is, committee, to evaluate a piece of land that a developer wants to give us. And if can be a quick process, you scroll through all those criteria, does it meet these or not? And, whether we make that call or another committee makes that call, you could do that.
Or you could use that acquisition site criteria or acquisition criteria and apply it to the acquisition fund. Say,
Well,
does the land meet that criteria in order to purchase it?
Right.
well, no, I think you could do both.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Anyway,
maybe we should look at that criteria, and recognizing that this provision is probably on its last legs. But if those criteria provide a vehicle and there's another body that made the decision within, say, 30 to 60 days, it's an option.
Yeah.
Do we want to keep all our options or foreclose an option? Just because it's so. This is hard. But
Well-
anyhow, I wouldn't fight to the death on keeping it, but maybe we should just take another look when we see those criteria.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Then I added about administration and planning board rules and regulations. And I, these are right from the senior housing bylaw. The planning board rules and regulations, when I saw this, I realized these rules and regulations are going to be the vehicle, I think, pursuant to which we're able to formulate the cost of the contribution to the land acquisition fund. How do we determine the amount of that? So rather than try and put it in the bylaw, we can, try and think about it and make it a regulation.
Well, one way would be to make it a percentage of the value of the whole project.
Well, absolutely, but I didn't want to try and write that because that's subject to discussion.
Yeah,
percentage of the
let's
whole
leave, that's like the matrix. Let's leave the magnitude.
Yeah,
So-
it's just hard to, it could be any number of ways of calculating it. And
Right.
so I didn't even want to go there, because I just stopped. I mean,
Right. And I agree. We don't need to talk about that right this second, but the rules and regulations we can amend as we see fit with no town vote. So my only, like, playing devil's advocate here, I'm not saying I'm for or against, but that's a critical piece, how we would charge a developer for whatever it is in this case. And people would say that, oh, well, you can change that whenever you want. It's not part of the bylaw that gets voted on by the town. It's part of your rules and regs.
Can I ask you a question? How did you determine the amount of the charge for the inclusionary zoning with Canterbrook? It was 2 payments of $217,500. How was that arrived at?
There was a minimum that they were going to have to pay. And that minimum was based on, I don't know, a formula from years ago.
it's a formula of adjusted median income.
Right.
And
Right.
I think it's 2 times or 2.5 times adjusted median income.
Something like that. But we realized that doesn't really pay for a unit, right? That amount was just too low to really, come close to buying a unit off site, let's say.
Right,
So
oh, yeah.
That's when we negotiated with the developer for a higher amount.
Yeah, so that's a whole separate discussion at some point, is how do you determine the amount of the payment? And I would think that, it has to be consistent project to project to project. It can't be your payment changes based on the nature of the project, because that's unpredictability, and
Yeah,
that could be,
Might be called bribery
yeah.
or extortion.
Yeah.
Well,
well, no, the developer needs
Gotta be
So it
careful.
could be called a confounded problem.
a developer needs to know generally what they need to do to, buy a piece
We
of.
have to come up with some type of formula that's applied across the board. It can't be,
I
Yeah,
like
a fee per unit or a fee per something or other. Right.
I like a percentage of the value of the land.
For the project.
No,
but
project.
Project.
Okay, whatever.
But
So
yeah,
that it's uniform across the space and it's really simple to understand.
right.
But anyway, Marnie, I want to go on to modification of lot requirements.
This is from the Wenham bylaw.
Yep, no, I understand.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. Number 1 says lots having reduced area or frontage shall not have frontage on a public way, but rather on a street created by the flexible development. So, it seems to say that you have to build a road in order to get frontage, but it can't be on a public road. And I don't know if I'm reading that right or not.
Yeah, it seems to me like they purposely, focused the development to be off the street in
Yeah.
a way that it's not visible, and it's sort of like an enclave and self-contained.
right.
But why would, let me ask a more general question about all of the lot configurations, the setbacks, the roads and everything else. Would it be to our advantage to allow a developer to substitute for all those requirements, site plan review?
Say that again?
Would we want to think about saying to a developer, there are no, explicit setbacks and so on and so forth, layouts, lot dimensions, all the things that we do in subdivision control, and say we want instead to have site plan review control over the development, which
Well, we
is
do anyway. It's a special permit.
Well, yeah.
any residential special permit is subject to site plan review.
No, but this would be.
Oh, we get to design the whole thing.
This is a
Okay,
special-
well, that's, I'm saying, I think that's a very powerful tool.
Yes, I agree.
And that in some ways, you can,
Pick out.
bundle up all of these rather than try and figure out, do you want 10-foot setbacks or
Yeah.
5-foot setbacks, or setting that all out in detail. You just say, this project is going to come under site plan review.
So,
I think
Well,
what this means, excuse me, I think what this means is it's lots having reduced area of frontage I think that's from what is required in the regular bylaw for the
That's right.
applicable
Yeah, but if
zone.
you go to the next page, there's this other thing, it says at least 50% of the required site and rear yards shall be maintained in a flexible development. We don't, it's like, no, we want to think about that, look at the development as a whole, exercise site plan review over it, not come up with a 50% rule. And there's a lot of things like that throughout this.
Yeah.
That I sort of feel you might bundle up
Constrain.
into site plan review.
well, again, I think that's the important thing to remember here, is a special permit is totally discretionary with the planning board, and we can turn down, unlike site plan review, or on a special permit, we can turn down a project for any and all or no reason. And so we don't have to, you have to justify it, but you can just say, basically, we don't like it because it blah, blah, blah. And that's the end of it. Unlike site plan review, where you can condition it, but you can't refuse to issue a permit. This is much
Well,
more.
then if we're going to have, if we're going to say the only way a developer can apply for this is to agree to a special permit application and undergo site plan review, then all of the details in the document about, micro details about how lots are laid out and how units are set back and so on, all that's unnecessary.
Well, you're right. I think what Rick is saying, you don't even need to say site plan review. The review is the special permit. You don't need to have any criteria if you don't want on minimum lot size, setbacks, whatever, just get rid of it. But it's going to be reviewed because it's a special permit.
Right.
It does.
I think
I wouldn't use the word site plan review because Rick's right. You can only.
you're mixing and matching. So I agree with you, Bill. I think I like getting rid of that first one that you said, and maybe number 2 as well. Some general guidelines are helpful to a developer, so that they can. Typically, what happens is they'll come in with a pre-review before application, like they did with Willow Street. Say, hey, here's what I'm looking at. I've got this piece of land. I'm going to divide it this way, and here are the buildings I'm going to put in, and here's the space I'm going to save. And what do you guys think? So we kind of give them, some guidance and say, well, too much density, or, if configuration doesn't work or whatever. So they have some, they can come back and say, okay, I listened to you. I redesigned it. Here's what I'm proposing. So any guidelines that we can provide minimal can help them. But I like your idea of not restricting them and saying, well, you can't have lots with frontage on a public road. Why not? Let them figure it
And in
out.
some situation, you might want it, right?
Right. I agree.
Well, actually, number 1 says exactly that. It says, provided, however, that the planning board may waive this requirement where it's determined, blah, blah, blah. But we could get rid of number 2, the at least 50%.
I think you just get rid of both.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Get rid of that is contrary to the first part. It includes rigidity, and you're trying to give it flexibility.
I think you get rid of both, but that's me.
Well, on the first round, let's, go with 1 and we can come back and Bill can fight this battle again.
Right. Contiguous open space.
I do have a comment. Surprise, surprise. And it's really just to add a couple of words to this, but people might want to read it first.
What's that? Oh, okay. Sorry.
My thing on this would be the 40%. I agree that we want any open space that is open to be somehow locked up in perpetuity through easements and an organization giving title, whatever it is. But I'm not sure I want to say you got to have 40% has to be contiguous. Maybe a guy's got a parcel where he's got 30% spaces. And it's not contiguous, but well, it's really good. So, we really like to do that. So it's again, we want to make sure that any open space that's created is maintained and preserved and never developed, and also open to the public. That's a really important issue, right? It's not just that we want the developer to create open space so his units can use the space. It's open space has to have public access.
I think
has to have some control.
I think that depends on the parcel. I mean, some, yes, absolutely. Especially if they're connected to other, trails or other open space, absolutely. It's,
But I feel a little reticent to give a developer a density bonus if he happens to say, well, look, all I really want to do is cluster some units here because the piece of land over here, they will benefit if the piece of land over here is preserved for them Okay, well,
Right,
then
but
that's,
right. But remember, the impetus for this whole thing, or part of it, was some of these parcels you may not even want much open space on them, because you want another parcel they're going to pay for or help pay for that is better for the town, or the town wants more, right? Some of these parcels might want to be a little more dense because they're not part of a larger contiguous space, or not part of a trail system, or what have you, right? So
well,
So what
yes, I
you're
mean,
saying is
but that's just saying you don't necessarily want any of the parcel to eventually be open space.
right.
Because the
right.
developer is getting all of his bonus points by putting money in the kitty.
I think this has to be tied to the size of the parcel. So,
It does.
if it's something, closer to the downtown, that's one thing. But if it's 20 acres, you definitely want that open space. You don't want to have 20 acres jammed full of.
No.
So I think.
Well, if it's a very big development and the developer says, in turn, I'm willing to spend $8 million to buy,
The land on Essex.
to keep the Getchell property preserved, but I want to build, 30 units over here on a piece of land.
Can I just jump in with a comment here?
Yep.
Because this brings up a larger question, which Marty, you actually added in on page 4, 8.18, number 3, where you allow this land to be actually held by the owners. The developer builds this and sets aside 40% and builds it. And a couple of the options you have is 1, the town, nonprofit, or 3, the corporation or trust owned jointly or in common by the owners, which I think is good. And I say that because if they deed it as open space, then it remains open space, but it also stays on the tax roll, which is critical here. One of the things I'm going to be harping on is if it becomes open space and it goes to a nonprofit or the town, we lose the tax revenue. And I'd like to see if we can do both. We can preserve it as open space and retain the tax revenue, because this is critical now, and it's going to be critical for the going forward in the future. So,
Rick, I agree with you. How do you do that? How do you do it and make it worthwhile, though? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, that's going to get into the matrix where I give them a hefty bonus for public access and connection to and improving adjoining trails. But giving
they
them.
still own it, so it's on the tax rolls.
We want to keep it from my perspective, where we can and where it makes sense. We want to keep this open space taxable. We get the best of both worlds. We get an open space. Hopefully it's connected to trails, and we can talk about the public access and where it's appropriate. So I'm all for public access where it makes sense, but I want it on the tax rolls to the greatest extent possible.
I agree with you
there are a couple
there.
of things you can do on that. One is you could conserve the space. So that's selling the development rights to somebody, but the ownership of the land actually remains. You sell the development rights to a nonprofit or town, but they still own the land. So it's not as valuable, but it's still there, right?
So would it be taxed at the same rate as if it were owned by the?
It would be underappraised because it has no development potential. But it would still be there. It would have value. Yeah, some value.
Well, Marty has on page 4, number 3, she actually gives them that opportunity to retain that land without selling the development rights, and that they have to agree to deed that, and it's deed restricted so that it has to stay open space, which I think is great. So
this is Wenham's bylaw that we're looking at, by the way. This is Wenham's bylaw. And the part that's italicized was language that Patrick recommended that we remove, but I respectfully disagreed with that because it gives the town an enforcement mechanism in the event that the
Yeah.
corporation or trust failed to adequately maintain the open space or whatever.
My recommendation was that I don't want to have the town in a predicament where it's expected to maintain this sort of property. And this text puts that responsibility on them. And I just, I'm sure DPW is not going to want to be in the predicament of having to perform that way.
Well, see, let's just work this through. So if it was open space and it's open to the public and it's open space in perpetuity, what happens if a dangerous condition arises on that property? Say it's a horse trail and there's some, problems that could cause accidents to happen. How would that situation be resolved? If
The owner has to take care of it.
Yeah, but what if they're bankrupt? What if they've walked away? Can't be found.
Well, then whoever takes over, if it's bankrupt, it may be taken over by a bank of sorts, or some other organization like that.
It's very possible to be an HOA.
Last resort would be the town. But I think that would be the last resort.
I think in a conservancy, all you're selling, well, you can make it any way you want, but all you need to sell is the development rights. You don't need to sell.
Well, why would you sell the development rights when you deed restricted this as open space in
The
perpetuity?
development rights are deed restrictions don't hold in perpetuity. They actually only hold for about 25 years.
Okay.
Once you have a tort, you sell the right to develop it. That's permanent. Can't do anything about that. Deed restrictions can be challenged and
Okay.
changed.
That may be a good solution. I just want to, before we go that route, is understand what the revenue implications is, and how that affects the assessment.
I think your point is excellently taken. That if what we want is these guys to give the land away to some nonprofit, then we're not going to get anything out of it. Right.
Right. We're screwed.
Yeah, but you also have to remember that if you've done this right and you've given them the proper bonuses and you've increased the value of the rest of that land by a lot because it's now developed with whatever number of units it is, you've vastly increased the taxable revenue of that part of the parcel. I'm not saying you don't want to get a little more from the open space, but
Right.
it's not even close to what the original
Right.
property.
Well, and hence that's why I thought this discussion would be valuable before we even got to the matrix, because then it will help on sort of form where do we want to weight the density bonus. But anyway, so I just think this is a good discussion. So I think if we're going to leave this section in, we ought to say, unless it's conveyed to the town or nonprofit or retained by the developer, so that retained by the developer is included in that contiguous open space. So so we know that that's also an option.
Let me throw out the concept of, as part of the permitting, that the developer have to set up an escrow for maintenance in the event that, as Marnie mentioned, they go bankrupt, they go away, et cetera, something to that effect. I'll just put it on the table.
I was thinking the same thing, because if let's say it's a condo and it's an HOA, and we know how these things go with maintenance of their own property, yet alone open space that's public, that over time that's not going to happen. And you're right, there needs to be some other mechanism to to allow that property to be maintained.
And that keeps the town off of that hook.
Okay, so that sounds like something worth considering.
Oh, well, Rick, wait, I just need a point of clarification. So the third, and the corporation or trust owned jointly or in common with the owner of the lots. Well, once the developer sells off everything, they're out of there unless it's a condominium of some sort,
Right.
and they are part of the master condominium deed. So
Yep.
do you have a sense of how you would, I think it would still be on the tax rolls if it's owned jointly by the owners.
Right, that's what
Oh,
I'm
yes,
getting
correct.
at.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can leave the language as is then?
I'm happy with it. And you know, Patrick's
And
made
then
a good,
Patrick's point is well taken. So whatever language that could be utilized to effectuate some type of escrow, you know, and I don't know how much that would be, but it was interest bearing over time, it might work.
Probably be a
My,
percentage.
my guess is those things never
Property.
work. The escrows turn out to be inadequate, and 10, 20 years down the road, it doesn't work. I think it's a problem. If it's privately owned and the development rights are deeded or restricted or given away, sold away, the maintenance of the land is an issue. I mean, you would have to rely on the fact that the homeowners.
and they don't want to
it's the
do it.
land- That's right. They don't want to let it deteriorate because it's the land next door.
I'm going to throw in an 8-ball here. This is all getting very convoluted and confusing. We've got a whole bunch of thoughts here, and we're only up to maybe partway in. Is anybody going to even want to think about doing a development under all of this?
Well, that's Richard.
Need
This
too
is
much
why we're
detail?
having this discussion, so that when we get to the density matrix, it has context. Because I believe that the density bonuses, if we're going to do all these things that we started to touch on, we've got to make these density bonuses really attractive. But so that's why I thought having this conversation about the language is important, because then we understand, gee, we're asking a lot. We better be able to give some value back.
But we've got to be, what you're saying is we're going to give a lot because we're asking a lot. in a sense.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's
okay.
also the reason that Tom Ford said we shouldn't even go this route. We should just have the kiddie route, right? Which is you pay the money into the open space proposal, because then you have big parcels of open space that somebody maintains, and you don't get into all of the who's in charge of, you know, taking care of this 10 acres or this 5 acres or this 4 acres. And once you open up that possibility, then you have all these issues.
Right.
Shall we move on?
Sure. Look dangerous.
Yeah.
No, I agree, Bill. It's getting
It's just like,
it's getting too long. There's too many possibilities. I mean, if
Well, you know what,
certain
what
parcel-
you could, I'm sorry.
if a certain parcel of land is worth something to the town, and it's connected to other open space, developer wants to build on part of it, you know, that's great. And if we want to incentivize him to give us or another entity that the rest of that parcel that we think is valuable, then we need to, you know, give him some additional bonuses to do that. Right. And that way it makes.
And that I think is kind of a nice way of doing it. Rather than putting money into the kitty, he's putting his 20 acres on the
Well,
left end
it's
of the
both.
parcel.
It's both, right? I mean, if that parcel is something, or a piece of that parcel is something that we want, and part of it has to be an open space, then give it to the town or an entity, right? But there's got to be an incentive for that. Or if that piece is not,
Rick wants to keep it on the tax rolls.
no, I understand, which is why I'm saying.
Another way of addressing Rick's concern is to say, look, With the density bonus, you're getting more rateable value there anyway. Would you rather have fewer units and, lower density, or more units and you carve off this piece of land where you lose the value on the piece of land, but on the other hand, you're gaining the value because you have more units?
That's right. Right. And that's one way of doing it. The other way is to, again, pay into that kitty for the town to buy land somewhere else and do your development on their piece of land. So there's two different ways here. That's one.
Yeah, but I think those should be the two main ways. So somebody who has a big estate and only wants to develop half of it, they want to give the town the other half, or give Greenbelt the other half. That we can do. And
yeah, and again, if it's we can have that discussion with the developer, right? If that's something that it's a piece that is worth doing, then great. If not, and then we give them additional bonuses for that, for more units on the other piece. If not, then we'll be like, you know what, we'd rather have the money. I don't know. The whole discussion about who's going to maintain this, all this stuff, trying to keep it on the tax rolls. I think it's just kind of it's convoluted, and it gets a little too complicated, and it's just not, down the road, who knows what's going to happen. And let's just eliminate that possibility.
Right. We either want the land, the town either wants the land because it's really useful for something, in which case we're happy to get it.
Well, right.
Or
for field or something.
Put money in a kitty and we'll buy a piece of land that we always wanted anyway.
Right. And I think that's the simplicity there is, hey, if you want the density, you're going to either, increase the open space or kick in money and or both. So I don't think it's that as complicated as we're thinking it is, but we've certainly raised the issue, something we need to come back to. But can we keep going?
But in neither of those cases do we get involved with
maintenance.
Maintenance, that the land is owned by the people for whom the development is occurring, and they have to maintain it. It's just, we have to stay out of that, I think.
Well, the other thing would be that this fund could have as one of its purposes to expend money to maintain contiguous open space in extraordinary circumstances. I mean, you could make a.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think this.
It's not just for capital
That would be a bottomless pit.
of land. It's also for maintenance.
That would be a bottomless pit.
So I don't think we're going to solve this tonight.
I think that with respect to this contiguous open space, the only time you'd have like maintenance issues would be if there were a trail going through there or some type of a culvert, beaver dams, and something like that. I don't think it would be large expenditures of money.
Marnie, that's not necessarily true. If it's a field, the field may need to be maintained to keep it good for open space for wildlife to stay in it. Audubon mows a lot of its property. That's an expense.
Yeah,
if you have trees and you have paths, trees come down across the path. You have to clear those trees. There's quite a bit of land management that goes into open space land. And some of it's pretty expensive. Unless you get volunteers like me that do it.
Well, my husband just came home and told us
we
we have a tree down on our driveway. So there you have it.
Yeah.
I don't think we want any of that section at all. I think if a guy wants to double his density on some parcel of land, and he's willing to put a huge amount of money into the kitty, we let him do it. Even if he doesn't have 40% shall be contiguous open space.
Why don't we give ourselves the choice?
Yeah, I don't think, this is a restriction. It says you can't even apply to this part of our ordinance unless you're willing to set aside 40% for open space.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got some homework to do on that issue in terms of figuring out how to, if we force the owners or we want the owners or encourage the owners or require the owners how that is going to be maintained. So we're probably not going to solve it tonight.
Right.
You could tie the base density to starting percentage of open space too.
But open space that they're gonna
Well,
give to somebody who wants it.
Yeah.
You either give us money or you give us open space. You can, I mean, it's a good way of getting people who might be a little cash short, but land rich to, you know, give away their part of their land and then get a bonus for the rest.
Yep.
But it's not it shouldn't be that we're trying to micromanage the development as a whole and how it's maintained and where the lots are.
As long as we can keep it on the tax rolls.
that's what happened with OSFPD, right? No one ever used it. So
Yeah.
Well, the density bonuses were ridiculous.
that too.
No, that was it. The density bonuses made it not worth doing all the crap that that bylaw required.
Yeah, well, there are too many other restrictions too. That was the main one. All right, moving on. Where are we? 8171.
Comment on 81.7 2. It's kind of repeats of 8.17.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can refine that so it includes all those things, but I don't think we need two sections that kind of repeat.
Yeah, I think 817 can maybe be reworded slightly to include more of the specifics in 8172.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can get rid of that.
Honestly,
Yeah,
actually, I felt the opposite. I thought you would remove it from 817 because I've read that thing like 7 or 8 times and I'm barely holding on by the end of it because it's so redirection of our intentions. Separate and clarify the two, I think, is maybe more successful.
Well, 8.17 assumes that this is going to be a public space. So, and that's a discussion point we have to work on. You know, people have voiced various things about this, but as you see, it says historic preservation and education, outdoor education, recreation, forestry, you know, if it's privately owned open space and it's not public, you know, that this is kind of like doesn't work. But
I don't think we want to go down that road. What if somebody wants to give a piece of land to the town for soccer fields that could be used for soccer fields because they're very flat and they're dry and so on? And you know, that's better than money in the kitty in this town.
Right, and the 8.17 it has that, it says educational or passive recreation, horticultural. I would add scenic vistas to be in there, or no. Anyway, I'm not. This wasn't an absolute. I just wanted to point out it was kind of duplicative.
Right,
I agree, Rick.
that can be combined. There clearly should be combined.
Okay.
New way to shorten it up.
So delete 8172?
Or just combine it with the other one, just, you know,
Yeah, I think that needs some rewording anyway. 817.
yeah. Well, Bill, are you back to the land swap here? Because if you say the developer can give land, that was the land swap back in the first part of our discussion. I'm a little
No, he's talking about we're talking about on the development parcel.
on the development parcel.
Yeah, right, Bill? That's what you were saying.
Yes.
So maybe we should then put that up front on the development parcel, not purchased for. You follow me?
Yeah.
Well, if it's money goes.
Part of the development parcel.
Yeah.
I'm confused. What do you say?
Well, the objection to open sites or the offsite open space was that it doesn't necessarily promote
Offsite.
development. It promotes preserving an offsite thing and fully developing on a current development. What Marnie's saying now is, if you're going to give me a piece of your development, that's just as good to get your density on the remaining portion. It's no longer an offsite requirement, because then we're still promoting overarching development in Hamilton. We're getting our open space within the development, and they're getting their density within the development. I don't see how that's personally different than just allowing the density and then creating open space requirements, except for that it puts that parcel in the town's hands and not in the development hands, and therefore off the tax bill. So
I mean, it's sort of true that the developer could say, look, I want to fully develop this site, but I've got another piece of land over here, which I'm willing to give to the town.
Yeah, but I thought we had that discussion earlier, and then we
right.
that was a can of worms we did not want to get into.
Can't go back to that can of worms.
I mean, I think you have to, I mean, I'm sort of in favor of allowing these 2 or 3 basic ways and not specifying anything more. And that way it's up to the board and the town think this is a good piece of land. The only reason that we didn't like that is because we thought it was putting too much power in the hands of the planning board. But
Right.
you're also doing that if you say to somebody who has 100 acres, we'll take 50 for the town, and then you can build those units on the remaining 50. That's putting a lot of power in the hands of the planning board too. It's saying that
Right, and that's why we decided to remove that.
Yeah.
Why are we going back to that? I don't want to go into more hot water, thank you.
I
can
thought
we-
we were going to leave that in limbo, waiting for the criteria about how we would evaluate that.
Yeah, so I'd like to leave that one asleep where we left it. And keep going.
Okay.
So we're on to ownership of the contiguous open space. Now, the point
We
about
talked about that.
whether it should be contiguous or not. Do we want it to be contiguous?
Again, I think it depends.
Well, that's the question. So should we say ownership of open space, leave out contiguous?
yes,
Yeah,
I don't think we want
or we
to
prefer,
bind ourselves to contiguous.
right. I mean, we prefer it where possible, but it's not set in stone.
Okay,
Something like
Yeah,
that.
you may have 2 completely separate pieces of land that are each not really great size, but beautiful or beautifully wet or something like that, and you really want them open.
Yeah, or a certain parcel of land is, you want the building or the development somewhere, and that just happens to create a couple, 2 or 3 pieces of open space. That's
okay.
you know,
And then I guess we can, based on our prior conversation, get rid of the next sentence, which says, shall at the planning board's election. Really be the owner's election.
Want to make it the owner's election instead of the planning board's?
That's what we discussed, because then
Yeah.
we're picking winners and losers, and that gets us into a whole pool of hot water we don't want to be in. Can we move on to page 4?
or do we defer that to another body or board? Because I mean, if the developer says, "Oh, I'm just giving this to the town,"
Well, that gets to my next question on page 4 is I don't think the town wants any more open space unless it's purchased, or like the schools want to purchase it for recreation, or the town wants to buy it for a new school, which I doubt it does. It has plenty of land to do that as well. Again, this gets to my point about the town taking on more responsibility that's going to cost money to own and maintain. So I'm going to start beating that drum again. This town can't afford any more expenses to be maintaining open space.
The one exception that I would put on the table is relative to protecting water resources.
Sure.
Like
Just saying.
drinking water you're talking about, Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Well, then what Rick really wants is just a cluster bylaw.
what I want is to I want to maximize the value to the town in tax revenue, and I want to minimize the expense to the town in maintaining open space that it can't afford and doesn't have the resources, manpower, or equipment to maintain.
Well,
Which
a
means-
cluster bylaw actually doesn't give you any, necessarily give you a density bonus. It just says instead of having, 20 houses on 20 acres, each with their own 1 acre lot, you can put 20 houses on, part of the project and have, a common area that the people own. So there's your value. And if the developer chooses that as opposed to putting 20 houses on 21 acre lots, it's because he feels there's more value in doing that. That's a more valuable development project. If it's more valuable, then it's more tax revenue for the town.
Right, and that's what OSFPD was originally designed to do. It was a cluster development bylaw. The idea was to cluster housing to preserve open space and maximize the land.
Yeah, but that's
value.
a little different because in the cluster bylaw, the people who now live in clustered houses, they own the common land.
Right.
And there's no restrictions on trails or anything else.
Well, I still believe that we can, and Marnie has it in her language, right on number 3, a corporation or a trust jointly owned by the owners. If it's a trust, and maybe that's the route, and Marnie would know better, or Lawyer would know better than me, is that it has to be, maintained as such as a trust, and that in that trust they have to maintain that land and we still haven't decided if it has public access or not, but they have to maintain it as open space.
Well, remember, yes, that would be a part of the cluster bylaw. And in a cluster development, it's in the interest of all the property owners to keep their park,
And their homeowners fees would go
That's
toward
right.
maintenance.
That you have a homeowners association.
Right. And I think that, and I could be wrong here, that addresses the concern about if we're going to give them, require them to have the open space and they own that open space, then they have to maintain that open space.
Right.
Yeah,
But I don't see any
if
reason
it's
somebody could get, if you provide the developer with that as a way of developing land, as opposed to 20 acres on 20 lots,
Yeah.
I see no reason for a density bonus. The developer says, oh, now I have another, another bag of tricks I can use, or another set of tools I can use to develop land, and he'll choose whichever he thinks is most valuable. In many cases, in particular situations, clustered development is quite profitable, more profitable at the same overall density than 20 units on 20 acres, 20 individual
Right.
lots.
I'm kind of missing your point here. I thought that's what we were doing, is we're encouraging cluster development in exchange for preserving open space. Isn't that what we're doing here?
I think you're right, Rick.
Am I missing something?
I mean,
I don't think so.
that's what it is.
Well, just going back a step, I don't think that the open space should be at the applicant's election, or if it is at the applicant's election, it should be subject to planning board approval.
Well, it would be
Because-
as,
Yes,
it would
yes.
be as a special permit.
Yeah,
Of course.
but we should, to say applicant's election, it's a little misleading if we're going to just say that election is meaningless. So
Okay, with the board.
I would just say subject to planning board approval.
Okay. That's fine.
Wait a minute, I'm lost. Where are you putting that, Marnie?
At the very first sentence in 8.1.8. It obviously would be subject to planning board approval because it's a special permit, but if you're going to say applicant's election, you got to qualify it. And maybe with 3, because I suspect most cluster developments are some type of condominium. Am I right on that? Is
Yes, there's a,
Canterbrook
yes,
condominium?
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So then we just put in here that the maintenance, the homeowners association fees, have to go toward the maintenance of this open space. Put that
Okay,
somewhere.
I love it.
Just make it mandatory.
All
I mean,
right.
maybe what we're doing is a combination law. What we're saying is, we're going to allow cluster development with no density bonus.
No,
If-
no, no, that's
Well,
not.
you don't need a density, hold on, you don't need it. We're allowing, if the open space that's created through cluster development is donated to the town or some other, or it has public, access, or then the developer can receive a density bonus. Or if he wishes to put money into the fund, he can get a density bonus that way. But we're also just flexible enough to allow cluster development with no density bonus at all. If you feel you want to put all the houses on the north side of the land and leave the south side open because that'll be, a better development, go ahead and do it. If you want to take the south side land and give it over to the town and have public access to it, then we'll give you a density bonus.
Right, yeah, you're saying if they want their open space to be private, right, you're
And
allowing.
we should allow that development,
But you don't
which
give,
we currently don't.
you don't give a density bonus for that necessarily.
You
You don't
get the
necessarily,
density
you get a
bonus.
density bonus by giving something to the town, but we're also giving you a little more flexibility on development regular to, individual lots.
I got a question here because I'm confused. Earlier, Rick said, or somebody said, that we don't want to increase our town costs, which we pay through property tax. So if the land gets conveyed to the town, then the town doesn't get any property tax from that land. And we're also talking about the owner, the condo association or whatever, maintaining the land. If they maintain the land, shouldn't they keep ownership of the land?
Well, that's what,
Yeah.
I think that's what Bill's saying, is that there's options here, right? If they keep ownership of the land, they maintain it, and it's still on the tax rolls.
Right.
If
We're
they-
just giving a developer the flexibility of not having to build, cookie cutter individual lot houses.
Right,
Something, then you're absolutely right that they are losing. We're losing that as taxable property. On the other hand, you could say, well, the houses may be worth a little more because they have this nice
Well,
park next to them.
there's more density that we're giving him because he's giving the town land to the town, or funding that, or putting money into that fund.
Fun.
You're making the other piece more valuable while you're getting open space.
Probably not as much as the land.
Well,
land that's being lost. Yes.
Well, no, but when you look at the original parcel and what the value of that was, you're still a fair amount higher with whatever development it is than what it had been
Yes,
previously.
that's very true.
So,
You're gonna build 20 acres instead of on 20 units instead of on 20 acres. You're gonna build them on 10, but there's still 20 units.
Right.
And then 10 acres are
Right.
going over to the town, let's
But
say.
if the land comes to the town, there's gonna be some, if it's open space, even if it is open space, there's gonna be some maintenance needed to keep it as usable open space in the sense that people can walk on it, maybe have trails, walking trails or whatever, like the Audubon Sanctuary. There's a fair amount of maintenance that goes into maintaining a property like that.
we've been over that part, which is why I think we're saying that the town wouldn't necessarily want to own that type of open space. It would be more, does the town need it for recreation or fields or what have you, something like that.
That's a whole different thing. If it's needed for recreation fields and so on, that's stuff that.
Or remember, if they give it to Greenbelt's in charge of it. They're a pretty good organization. So, I mean, if they wanted to lop off half the land and Greenbelt was willing to take it, they thought it was a good deal, then I'd say, sure, you get a density bonus for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that. Does Greenbelt pay taxes on the land that it owns?
No.
No,
I think
that's
so.
that's the problem.
That's right.
So
I mean, we're setting up a catch-22 here, or some kind of a problem here.
But you're not, right? As long as this is what I said at the outset of this whole thing is, if you're doing this right, you're losing some open space one way or the other, most likely, if they're giving it to another entity and not holding on to it. You need to make the rest of that land valuable enough that you're getting whatever
You get-
more in taxes than you did before.
That's the hooker. That's the hooker. The developed part of the land that's involved has to be substantially increased in value by the development to increase its tax revenue. Okay, I get what you're getting at.
You are, in the sense that if you put 20 units on 10 acres instead of 20 acres, you're making the land of the 10 acres underneath those 20 units more valuable.
Right.
Yeah. And if you're going to put the units on there, that will increase the value.
Well, then you have the units, you're right.
Well, yeah.
But you're going to do the units anyway. You can look at it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're having this discussion because it really gets to the heart of the matter is what's the density that we want to allow.
The way I understand this, I think it's getting lost, is you have to set a minimum amount of open space that's required in the development because you only get the density bonus when you go over and above that.
Well, you can make it a continuous formula. You get,
Right, well, Wenham was,
2% for 10, but that's what I
Wenham
meant.
had 5% for, whatever it was, with a maximum of 25%. But you have to set that minimum, whatever it is,
I don't know.
in order to get the density bonus. It's not just.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So Bill, for your example, it would be 20 houses on 8 acres with 12 acres of open space, and then you get the density, then you get the increased density as a result. Follow me? The way the Wenham bylaw is crafted, that's how I envision it working.
Yeah, I think what we said earlier is we don't necessarily want to set 40% as the minimum because that might vary between wherever the parcel is.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a 1 acre parcel downtown, it's almost ridiculous.
Right.
Putting a 2-family on there and that's it.
Right. And some parcels may not need or be able to do hardly anything.
Right, but that gets to the various incentives. Each development may not be able to use all the incentives.
Right.
So a small parcel, we're not talking about a density
Marty, my
bonus
only
for
worry-
open space. per se.
My only worry, Marty, is the 40%. I mean, it might be, but you know, if he's willing to give 80%, well, then he gets a big density bonus. If he's willing to give 20%, he gets a small little bonus. And I'm not, I don't know, I mean, we could have a minimum, but I'm not rigid about the minimum, actually.
Well, I kind of, you know, it's, you know, to me, obviously, if it's a relatively small parcel, 40% is a lot. But if it's a big parcel, say, you know, 30 acres, 40% of that, well, it's not so imperative if you make it bigger, you know.
Well,
So I don't know how we come up with an amount. Wenham did the 40%.
Yeah, I don't
We
want to.
do.
I don't want to hem ourselves into that. I think Bill's right in that you want to. What you're going to do is you're going to set the base density lower than you were initially, and then give a bonus for every whatever percentage of open space that they do, versus automatically saying you have to have 40.
So you'd have sort of a sliding scale.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, because if we want to have, I mean, you don't have to have one size fits all here, but if you want to say, you know, it's 40%, then that's running through all of the zones in business district, whatever that we have in here, right? So I think the sliding scale eliminates that. It can be the same for all of them, but there's not a minimum for all of them. But you have to define the base density that you're willing to start at with no open space.
Well, my view is, well, I know that was where we were at the beginning, and I think politically we have to set the base density equal to the current density. I'm willing to give a fair amount of bonus, but I think we have to start with what we have.
Well, Rick, I think you were right. This is, by going through this language, we're getting to the heart of it, which is the matrix. And again, you know, the issues that I identified, you know, are really germane to this, because, you know, what's the minimum parcel size? Again, like with the senior housing bylaw, I think it was an acre.
Yeah. I think we lost Rick, by the way. I don't know where he got to.
There may be power outages.
True.
We lost Rick Mitchell.
Yeah.
Maybe he just got up and walked out for a minute.
Oh, but his whole thing is gone. I mean, usually you just.
Oh.
The power
Okay.
may be out.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, my husband just called to me. He came home late and there are trees down on Asbury. There are a lot of trees down.
Yeah, I just got a text from Rick telling me that the power went out. He's having to fire up the generator and he'll be back with it shortly. What a Boy Scout, huh?
Yeah, really.
Hey, man, I gave up on firing up generators and put one in that's permanently there. Poor Rick.
Well, I mean, it's getting late. Maybe we should just, you know, come back to this with some other. I'll take a crack, I think, at the matrix, maybe, and just set up a couple of bullet points of what the guideline is here. And I can send that to you, Patrick.
Okay, sure.
And we just, you know, we'll keep the conversation going.
Yeah, we're not going to figure this all out in one night.
No,
So,
but it's good to have the conversation.
right. No, I think we had some good points made tonight and a fair amount to think about. No, I'm good with that if everybody else is.
Oh, I am.
Or
And so, I really think, we need to think about the base density and, the incentives that Rick has versus the ones in the senior housing bylaw. Maybe they're ones we haven't even thought of yet.
Right.
And just kind of go through it step by step because, there's no hurry. I mean, we're not going to make it for town meeting, so we don't have to rush through this. And it's helpful to take things step by step.
You didn't say which town meeting, Marnie.
The one in November?
I'm being facetious, never mind.
The one in the spring?
Sure, or the next spring after.
Yeah, well, no, we talked about spring. We didn't, we said there's almost no way of doing this for fall.
Yeah.
So, okay. Moving on. Review of minutes of the 21st. Everybody had a chance to look at those. July 21st, that is. Any comments?
Well, I
No.
took some notes, and my notes say that Bill Wheaton moved to make you chair of the planning board. So, Bill, did you do that or not?
I did.
You
You
did.
did?
Yes.
Yeah,
And Rick vice chair. Yep.
right. So the minutes
But
are
you're
still
talking about-
incorrect
You're
as
talking
to
about 721, right? Or are you talking about 77? Brian, you said 721.
It is
Marnie, you're talking about 77.
7-7.
That
We're
was-
not, that's the only one before
Sorry,
us.
I'd forgotten about those. Yeah, I just said 721.
We don't have 721.
Yes, we do. We got it in a, I have it.
I do too.
So I went back, I listened to the recording and I took verbatim out of the meeting, who seconded, who made the motions, et cetera, for July 7th.
Yep.
Verbatim.
Okay. No, I'm fine with that. So yeah, so we're on this. We'll say we're on the 7th right now. Let's put off the 21st if Marnie hasn't seen them.
No, I didn't. I checked my email. Could be my error, but I don't have them.
Okay. All right.
I'm good with,
Any
I'm
comments?
good with 7.
I'm sorry, Bill.
I'm good with 7.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of July 7th.
Or
Second,
Second by Richard.
yes.
We'll do a roll call. All those in favor, Bill,
Aye.
Marnie,
I
Richard,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
and Brian is an aye as well. We'll leave the 721 till later. Anything else, Patrick? Any other reports?
Let's see. I got an email today from Dave Tregorth. He's requesting to modify the site plan review approval at the next meeting. This is a good modification where they're taking the 2 affordable units and they're deed restricting to 9 affordable units. So that's always a great thing and very rare, in fact. I assume it's as a consequence of the funding mechanisms that they're pursuing with the state. He also at that time wants to update the board on some of the progressive design work they've done to, I assume, the skin of the building. So should be an informative meeting. Other than that, fall town meeting will be November the 14th. There was a
Rick,
thought that it was going to be November the 7th, but it's turned out to be more workable for the 14th.
Patrick, back to your original point, who was that you were talking about?
Willow Street.
Developer of 59 to 63 Willow Street.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. The Hamilton Development Corporation.
That'd be it.
That'd be it. Okay.
Great. Anything else from anyone? Board reports? No?
No.
No?
Open Space Committee hasn't done anything. I haven't done anything.
Okay. All right. I think we're good then.
What meeting was I at? I don't even remember. Where Patrick, it was a Gordon Conwell meeting
That was the last meeting.
here at the planning board.
Yes.
And we had the president on. Yep.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, okay,
Scott Sundquist and Blake Seward.
yep, okay,
I hear a motion to adjourn.
so made.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Bill Wheaton,
Aye.
Marnie,
Aye.
Richard,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Brian's and I as well.
Okay, guys.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
See you
Aye.
Okay,